Hi, and welcome to Dear Art Producer. I am your host, Heather Elder, and today is August 28th, and we are joined by Elisa Morse, founder and executive producer of Piecemeal, a commercial production company. After stumbling into commercial production and learning the ropes, Elisa made the leap to an on-staff producer at Snapchat in its heyday. While there, she became passionate about the authenticity, connection, and reach that social media can provide, and combined that insight with her production know-how to see production through new lenses and serve all screens. Founded in 2018, Piecemeal is a female-owned and led forward-thinking production company that specializes in client-forward work. She's also an animal lover and rescuer. Welcome, Elisa. How are you today?
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We were joking earlier that you and I have been trying to schedule this since April, and we are just thrilled that it's finally happening. So thank you for your patience and all the back and forth. And I'm so glad that we're going to get to chat today.
Yeah, same. Thank you. We can mark time by this.
That's true. I'd love to know a little bit more about you, right? Your background, what you were doing before Snapchat, how you got to Snapchat, what it was like there, and what kind of led you to Piecemeal, what it means to be, a female forward production company. Just kind of share all of that with us, kind of set the groundwork here for the rest of our conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's funny because my path has been kind of meandering to get to this point, and I feel so grateful for that. And there's also days where I'm like, wow, this is so exciting to be here. Who would have guessed? I took a while to find what I wanted to do, which is kind of ironic because when I was 8 years old or something, I told my dad I wanted to be a copywriter, and I wrote a little ad for peanut butter that I thought was so clever. And also, how did I know what a copywriter was? I literally have no idea. But I think about that moment and I'm like, somewhere deep in my brain, I must have wanted to be in advertising. But I'm from Santa Fe, New Mexico. And at that time, there were no tax incentives or industry there. And so my only exposure to the industry was through theater. So I got a degree in theater from Emerson College. That's my dirty little secret that nobody knows, but now everybody will know. Came out to LA and was just really bummed about the audition thing. And I think from day one kind of was like, ooh, I don't know about this acting thing. But then you have all this pressure of I just got a degree in this and I should probably try. So I started producing things for myself to be in just because I wanted a little bit more ownership, and was like, wait a minute, I really like this. I was an assistant to a producer who did food reality TV and game shows for a very long time. It was amazing. And then one day was like, oh my goodness, I really I need to get my shit together, pardon my French. And was lucky enough to freelance PA at an age I was much too old to be PAing at a commercial production company that ended up bringing me on staff, and I became an on-staff coordinator and production manager and really working closely with the head of production. And they taught me everything, which I'm so grateful for. And from there, I was recruited by Snapchat. And after I went to Snapchat, just coming back into the freelance world and freelance producing, all the conversations on set had changed. This was 2015, 2016. And suddenly social was on everybody's radar, but everybody was looking at it in this kind of odd external lens. And having been internal at Snapchat, I really felt like I had something to offer brands in terms of being that hybrid of being very client forward, understanding the ad world, while also speaking social a little bit more organically than perhaps other people were handling it. And that was really the idea for Piecemeal. And what's funny about it is, now I would not say we're a social forward company. I think there's some companies that do social really, really well and are really, influencer based. And churning out that stuff. But I think now everybody has to be social forward. So it laid the groundwork. But yeah, that's sort of the meandering path.
I think something that was said in your intro, this idea of you really being interested in and understanding what it means to serve all screens, I think is really important because, brands have to think about where their consumers are showing up. And it really has changed how agencies and brands directly kind of go about creating content. And it's been really interesting from the repping point of view, and I know also from the production point of view. So I'm sure having that insight from Snapchat was really helpful for you at a time, especially if it was during Snapchat's heyday, at a time where a lot of people were just really figuring out, like, is it an extra channel? Do I just create the same content and put it there? Or is it a different channel that I have to treat differently? So that must have been really helpful for you.
Yeah. Well, and I think you bring up such a great point where now more than ever, there's so many deliverables, and we're really lucky to do a lot of client direct work. And so I think we get to see a little bit more of what the clients themselves have to go through in terms of they're often finding out on set, what is their ad buy and where is this going to be served? And just being able to capture it all together is something I really think we specialize in, but is also just a requirement for the industry. Part of the reason.
Well, and understanding that each one of those channels, the people who are on the other end of them see the content differently and require different tone and point of view. And I think it's a challenge. And also there's so many more channels that clients have to and brands have to push content through. It becomes more expensive and it affects our budgets.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think your point is well taken, where it's there's so many different channels and people are viewing content differently. And something that used to be oh my goodness, all caps broadcast, is that where the most eyes are now? I don't know.
Yeah.
But we try to give equal emphasis to all of it, and also just really work closely with the creatives that we bring on from our side to understand, what is the need and set everyone up for success. So it's as silly as it is, if we're delivering for a 9:16 frame, our production designer is looking at what that vertical is and making sure that plays on its own.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's very different. It's very, very different. And you and I had this little mini conversation before we started recording, but it's critical to keep evolving, as an artist, as a producer, as a brand, and really find partners to collaborate with that you can keep learning and keep pushing yourself forward.
Yeah, totally. I mean, as we were talking about before, I'm super inspired by business leaders, in part because Piecemeal is a business and I'm running a business, and just having to actually function on that level separately from just the production world. But if you really talk to or listen to, I guess I should say, I'm a big fan of podcasts, makes you feel like you're in a conversation with someone. But if you really listen to leaders in these huge corporate spaces, everything they say is you have to be able to pivot and you have to be able to evolve what you do.
It's so true. And I think also collaboration is so important. And I don't just mean collaborating, I'm going to find this stylist to collaborate with, which is very important for sure. But it's finding people who are going to kind of push you and be alongside you as an equal in the process, and not just see yourself as the only one, oh, I'm the producer, I'm going to make this happen, or I'm the director, I'm the one with the vision. It's recognizing that there's going to be so many more pieces to this, including the client, right? That everybody is expected to have a voice and people need to still have their strong point of views. So I don't know. I find that part of it switching as well. And this idea of collaboration, which I know is a bit of a buzzword, but it really is, it is very important, that pre-production time, the time to visualize what you're doing and get it right before you step on set is more and more important.
Yeah, I think that's such a good call out. And I think that's one way our industry has really changed, where there used to be this idea of this, photographer, director with this auteur vision who was coming into set and just running the show. And I just don't think that's what clients want or need anymore. I think clients at this point are such an asset to have on hand, and they know their brand better than anybody. And to join hands then with a creative, I know can sometimes be creatively frustrating for someone like a director or someone like a photographer to not get as much ownership maybe as they once did. But I think it also makes sure that whatever you're creating for a brand does what it was intended to do.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. It's just so important to kind of recognize that the industry has changed a lot, and clients, especially those that you work with directly, have, a lot more say in the process and want to be present for the process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's my favorite part of all of this is the collaboration. I feel like as a producer, I always say that my job is to be a question asker. Like, I don't know how to do anybody's specific job, but I know how to ask the questions of each department, each creative, each to this, to kind of facilitate that creative.
I love that. I used to say, although I still do, that I'm a bit of a translator, right? So I have to translate, let's say, photographer language into creative language, and then art producer language back into producer language, or art, or creative language. Like, I'm the go-between that needs to make sure everybody understands what everyone else needs and their needs are heard. So I love the idea of kind of switching that and just being the question at how can I help? What does this mean? What can make it better? All of those questions.
Yeah, I love that idea of a translator too.
And so what are you known for on your team?
We really try to have a company culture at Piecemeal, and we really try to instill respect for everyone on our crew, no matter who they are. We try to not take things too seriously and have a good time and make our set something that people want to be a part of. We've been really lucky to have a lot of the same collaborators at this point for years, and are always really excited to welcome new people into the fold, of course. But I think part of that is really because we treat people decently, which should not, I think, be a differentiator in this industry, but seems like maybe it is. I always say nobody's curing cancer in our industry. Yeah. And we take the work we do very seriously and our responsibility to our clients very seriously. But I also think in this environment, nobody's going to work well if it's an icky one to be in. So that's really the tone that I try to set. And I hope it's what I'm known for. I don't know. Maybe somebody's going to be like, she's a jerk.
I've worked with you for a little bit now, and I would be very surprised if anybody said that. So
thank you.
So tell me a little bit about what your clients are asking of you right now.
Mm-hmm. Flexibility.
In what way?
Foremost. In all ways. I mean, I think, things have just changed so much in our industry and continue to change, where, we've had projects recently where they're dialing in the creative after the job is awarded. Deliverables are being added, and they're not trying to keep anyone on their toes or anything like that. They're just being told, like, hey, this is a new need, or whatever it may be. I mean, I think it's an odd time for brands in this world. I think there's, a lot of reorgs, and public perception of the economy is different than the economy itself. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of pressure financially for ad budgets to be cut. And so really, in terms of flexibility, it's financially, it's creatively, it's timelines, and just becoming a partner for brands to really kind of be their ride or die and go along for the ride and make it happen versus this super structured process that we used to be in a little bit more, where it's like there's more lead time, there's more money, there's clear creative. It's just like, all right, let's go. Let's make it happen.
And I do experience that on our end as well. This idea of flexibility, first of all, anything can happen at any time, right? Nothing is linear anymore. Mm-hmm. And then even when you get to set, the producers that we work with that are the most successful, and then also the artists, are the ones who can kind of go with the flow in an easy way and have solutions to, and not everything, like being flexible doesn't require always something not going well or right. It just means something's changing. And I think having the right attitude and approach, and also respecting the boundaries of maybe what the scope was, that's important too. But just to be able to be flexible and nimble in those situations and come up with solutions that work.
Yeah, totally. And I think walking the line between, I was saying recently to a client, like, my job is to make sure you don't step in shit.
Right.
And it's like, having the experience to know, like, this is something we can be flexible on versus this is something we genuinely need to know right now, because if we don't, these are the repercussions.
Yeah.
So walking that line together and just making it feel like it's something that is accomplishable instead of just layering on pressure on someone who already has plenty of it.
And I do think having a very clear point of view and a very clear understanding of the process and not being afraid to speak up is important. Mm-hmm. A lot of clients have gotten, much more used to kind of calling some shots that maybe they didn't before. And there are, some people and agencies maybe, or producers, other people out there, sometimes aren't speaking up when they should. And I think a really strong producer who is not afraid to raise their hand and say just what you just said, like, hey, we can be flexible on this, but we can't be flexible on this. This is going to affect your production, and not be afraid that the client might walk or what the client might say. But, I'm here to make sure you don't step in shit. And I'm now raising my hand to tell you we need this.
Yeah, totally. I think when I was a newer producer, I thought that being a producer was just being a yes man, and have learned throughout the evolution of my career that it's really to keep the project on the rails, and sometimes that does mean, nicely setting some guardrail.
The velvet hammer, as my husband calls it.
That's so funny. I'm going to steal that.
You should. It's a good one. It's like such an immediate metaphor. It works.
I can picture it. It's like red velvet.
Okay, so the projects that come across your desk, are they more motion forward or print forward or both? Like, what do they look like right now?
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, we're a motion company, but just to tie it back to what we were talking about previously, we also do a lot of shoots that are motion and stills. And we do some shoots that are stills only, for sure. But I think in terms of speaking to all screens, more and more, we've seen that people do need to capture video and stills side by side. And that's something that we really try to integrate for our clients to really truly capture two shoots in one.
Yeah, it is so interesting. When I first started my career, production companies, it was a whole different model and different, our paths would never cross. And now we're crossing paths with production companies all the time. And it's, and agency or clients and brands are reaching out sometimes to a production company and not to an ad agency. So, again, like we talked about earlier, before our call, our worlds are just kind of colliding and crossing through each other's paths more and more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It feels like there is no standard process now, which I personally think is cool. You know, as somebody with a non-traditional background, I love thinking outside the box. I love when work comes to us in unexpected ways or collaborating in new ways. So I'm all for it.
I agree. Yeah, totally. Okay, so how about, like, how do you find the talent that you work with?
Mm-hmm. You know, it's a really big part of what we do. We're a production company that doesn't rep directors exclusively. And I could have a whole conversation about that. I just don't know in this day and age that it is a relevant model anymore, at least for the way we do business. So we have a lot of directors and photographers that are frequent collaborators of ours who, while they're not exclusive, are kind of the usual suspects, which I say in the best way. But we also, part of the reason we don't have a roster is just because sometimes having seen it in action, it feels like you can kind of be pushing somebody who may not fit the role perfectly, but that's who you have. So we do a lot of searches for directors and photographers. We're always trying to keep up with who is out there so that when something comes across our desk, we have a whole database of people that may or may not know that they're on our radar.
Yeah.
Just to go, oh, this person does this really niche specific kind of work, because we always want to recommend the perfect person for the job.
And do you take meetings with artists or do you just kind of click around on their websites to get to know them? Or is it a different process for you?
Yeah, kind of all of the above. I would like to take more meetings sometimes, just, you know, by virtue of the fact that this conversation has taken 5 or 6 months to happen. It can be a little bit tough, even with the best intentions. But definitely if there's somebody really exciting, I'll reach out and just say, hey, do you want to say hi? You know, I'd love to get to know you. Because we also want to set people up for success. And we also take our responsibility to our clients very seriously in terms of, you know, somebody's reel could be amazing, but they might not have some of the qualities that you and I have been talking about. You know, they may not be flexible. They may not be whatever. And so also starting those conversations sooner rather than later is always helpful, just to like really get to know who someone is, because that's just as important.
True. And what are you seeing out there in terms of trends in, you know, motion and still content creation? Is there anything that your clients keep asking for over and over again, or?
That's a good question. No, I mean, I think what I really look for, and I think what clients really look for, is a very distinct point of view in their work. I think you can scroll through a lot of different sites where the work is good, but it's not quite memorable. And I think it's kind of ineffable to be able to define what that point of view is, because it's different for every person. But just something that feels like that little bit of uniqueness that not everybody could make that piece of content is something that I'm always looking for sure.
I kind of want you to repeat that, because I think that's so important, this idea of having a strong point of view. And I think in today's day and age, it's so important because there is so much competition out there. And especially on the that lifestyle spectrum is large. There is a lot of different types of lifestyle photography. So how are you going to stand out and be different and rise to the top? I think is really hard. And I think that idea of having a very strong point of view and creating new content often, you know, is important.
Yeah. And I think, to say another buzzword, authenticity, right? Mm-hmm. That's behind the camera and in front of the camera. I think it can feel like, well, I don't know what it can feel like, but
I actually think you're touching on something that is such a big conversation, like look at Gen Z right now. They completely push back on something that is not authentic immediately. They realize, they see it in TikTok, they see it on Reels, they see it on their YouTube, like wherever they are watching content. And again, using the buzzword, they know they can see right through it. So they'll not only ignore it, they'll push it, they'll actively push it away. And I feel like we hear that word all the time on every creative call I sit on. And what I try and impress upon my artists is that 100% you can take an authentic image, but it's not about like that image. It's about the environment that you create on set so that an authentic moment can happen so that you can then push the button to get it. So it's more than just saying, I create authentic image, this is an authentic image, because everyone says it. Like literally everyone wants it and everyone says it. So what is it that you're doing that no one else is doing? And it's beyond your playlist. It's beyond natural lighting. It's, beyond good food on set. It's like, who is it about? What is it about you that you bring to the set and bring to the pre-production and to the creative calls and to your treatments and everything that is going to give you that strong point of view so that these authentic moments can happen on set and you are there with your talent to, capture it.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, I think it's so easy in this industry to feel like, well, what do they need me to be? And that's not a question that anybody should ask themselves anymore. I think exactly who you are and owning that is going to create that authenticity behind the camera and in front of the camera. And acknowledging that, yes, in doing so, you're not going to be right for every single job, but I think that generalization, both as artists, as people, and in their work, I just don't know that anybody's excited about it anymore, even if it's like good work, know?
That's so true. Yeah. It's such an interesting thing to think about.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So here's another question. What would you like our listeners to know about the process that you go through from maybe finding talent, estimating with talent, bidding with a client, like in the entire production process that they may not know or understand?
Mm-hmm. It varies for every single job we bid on. And I think that's just something that is good for people to know is there's no streamlined process now in terms of the pitch process going the same way every time. And I think there's so many different factors that go into bidding. And sometimes you're going to win and sometimes you're going to lose. And it's good to have a crack at that. But I think it's a lot less personal than people think it is. I think it's pretty subjective in a sense where what resonates with a client, and sometimes it's going to go your way and sometimes it's not. And I think there's this idea of like, well, what could I have done differently? Which is a really good question to ask. And sometimes the answer is truly nothing,
Yeah. I've always said a lot of times when we don't win a job, we'll get the standard email, which is, so sorry, we went another direction. Thank you for your time, which is worse, I think, than losing the job because there are so many hours put into the treatment and the estimating and the calls. And, it's not like the old days where we would just, type up a quick estimate and have a quick creative call and be done with it. It is a lot that, the job is pretty much produced in everyone's mind by the time, we're submitting everything. So to get an email like that is really hard sometimes because it's just like, what am I going to go back to the team? Like, sorry, you didn't get it. Like, that's it. Right. And I'm telling you, I use you as an example all the time. The recent job that we did not get with you was, I've saved your email.
Oh,
the insight, first of all, the time you took to write it, the insight that you shared, the honesty and the transparency in the process. You literally said the client went another direction, but in a much more elegant, insightful, kind, thoughtful way. And I've saved it because it's an example of how important it is in this industry to recognize the amount of time that goes into a project and really you were very respectful. So I really appreciated that.
Oh, thank you for that. Yeah, I feel like that's a skill set I've had to learn, to be honest, just in terms of transparency being really more respectful than not having a tougher conversation. I'm very inspired by, I forget what they call it, but Free the Work does an annual review, or I guess did an annual review of interviewing creatives and just their thoughts on certain things that were happening. And it's really underlined to me what it's like to be on the creative side. And they've just talked about so many personal experiences from directors who have poured their all into a pitch process only to find out, they were kind of just checking a box on a triple bid. And that's such a bummer.
Oh, such a bummer.
Yeah. And so I really tried to get very conscious about being more transparent, in part because I appreciate that transparency. I would rather someone give me specifics about why we didn't get a job or whatever the details may be, just so I can appropriately frame it. And I try to do that on the front end too. And it's not something I've always done, but it's something that I've really tried to implement more just out of respect, to be like, hey, I want to be transparent that I'm not quite sure what the client wants for this. And we're putting 3 directors up for this job. Hey, I want to be transparent that 2 of those directors are going on to pitch, or whatever it may be. So people can regulate their time and interest and expectations as well, to be like, oh, sure, I'll throw my name in the hat, versus being like, oh my goodness, this is it.
Yeah. And I think I would imagine that insight that you have and the appreciation that you give to the process also comes from the fact that, you don't get every job that comes across your desk either. Mm-hmm. Whereas when I bid with an ad agency, they've already got the client, they already got the job. Right. So they're choosing, let's say, 3 people that they're bidding, and 1 person will get that job.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes with you might be pitching a piece of business against, alongside another production company, and you might not get that. So, I feel like when I do bid with production companies, a lot of times they are more thoughtful about their replies. And I have plenty of ad agency art producers who are amazing and are also equally thoughtful with their replies. Yet I've been doing this long enough to know that, most people get busy. And the easy answer is, sorry, we've gone in another direction.
Yeah, totally. And I think people don't want to hurt people's feelings or this or that. But I think, I don't know, it's just kind of a new world in that people want to know the real deal. And it can be frustrating, honestly, sometimes as a producer, where there's people who handle things great and are very transparent. And then there's also people who I think are a little bit more old school in terms of like, thank you very much, dear sir or madam. But sometimes we're also chasing answers. Like if I'm not giving someone transparency, it's because I just don't know, and whoever that person is doesn't.
Let's talk about you guys, piecemeal bidding a job with a brand directly. How do your clients, how do they find you?
I'm really lucky in that so many of our clients are just from my own relationships and people who I've worked with for years and years and years, where we have an amazing foundation and have been able to grow together. I think a lot of what we do is personal. The way we produce is personal, and leaning into those relationships enables us to really be on the ground floor. And then we're also really lucky in that, those people go off to other companies or referrals happen. And we do some work with amazing ad agencies as well. But it's what we do right now, at least, is very word of mouth or people we already know, and have been super lucky to just maintain our business without reps or anything like that. And at some point, I'm sure we'll need to grow and that will need to change. But right now, yeah. And I mean, sometimes it's also through a creative. Like we work with directors who somebody will come to them and say, hey, we're interested in doing a project with you. And then they'll bring us on. And then from there, a lot of times those agencies will come back and say, hey, do you have anybody who's like this if that director isn't right for them? So
I think you touched on, this idea of relationships is huge. I've been doing this for a very long time, and I rely on my relationships all the time. And I feel very fortunate that I started at a time where the business it was very easy to solidify those relationships. I was on set a lot. I traveled a lot. I would do portfolio shows in agencies. I would throw parties. And it was really easy to have access to people and large groups of people, not just the one art producer or the one creative, you'd go into an agency and meet a lot of people and go on set, and you'd meet the clients, and then you'd meet the creatives. And, that doesn't exist as much anymore. It's harder for me to get on set. It's harder for me to get into an agency. While they are going into the office, they're hybrid. A lot of people aren't there. The whole idea of the portfolio show has evolved and pretty non-existent. I can take people out to lunch and dinner and host parties and things like that, but it's different. It's just very different. And I still believe so much of the success of my business has been the relationships that I've been able to, I don't want to take credit for it, but it's the relationships that I've either been invited into or the ones that I've, been able to foster on my own. And it's pretty special.
Yeah, I think that's what's meaningful about the work we do. And really my favorite part of all of this is that collaboration, but also just those really authentic relationships where like I love so many of the people that we work with, and just getting to see their careers evolve and grow and getting to go along for the ride to help support the work they're doing is just very meaningful to me.
I agree.
Yeah. Yeah. But I do think it's all about relationships. And it kind of ties into that authenticity where it's like, I think this idea of the, slick producer glad handing is just not how we do business. I'm sure that there are shops that still do it, but really showing up as who you are and what you can do in an authentic and meaningful way, to me, is the only way I know how to do production versus all the bells and whistles that maybe used to go on in a slightly different era.
Yeah, I remember when someone suggested to me that maybe when I was looking for, thinking to leave my job as an account person, why don't you be a rep? And I was like, oh God, no, nobody likes them when they come in. No. And then, I learned more about what it was and why I thought I would be good at it. And I was like, oh, okay, I don't have to be that person. I can be my own kind of flavor of what that is. And I love it.
Oh, yeah, that's very cool. And, I think it is interesting. And I think a question I neglected to answer earlier on in this because I was rambling about something else, but it's just the female perspective in production. I came up at what was admittedly a very male-dominated company and culture and kind of like the old school ad world kind of way. And while I'm always very grateful to them for everything they taught me practically, it took me a little while after going out on my own to understand what is my voice and my approach and my contribution And it's not like, the model of taking the client out until 2 a.m. and drinking until everyone blacks out. Like it is that more thoughtful approach. And I think one thing that's really exciting about the industry diversifying more, whether that's female-owned companies or whoever, is getting those different approaches, because even on the company side, it's personal, and who you are shapes your point of view on business. And I think that women leaders in this industry are really important in changing the culture of the ad world and creating these meaningful relationships in a different way than maybe they've been experienced before.
You said that perfectly. I'm going to use that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I do think there's something different. I mean, I was just thinking about how, we were thinking of getting WeBank certified, and I saw the WeBank bug on your email, and I reached out to you and said, hey, we're thinking about doing this. I've heard it's really hard. What was your experience? And at that point, we didn't know each other super well, and you were so gracious. You looped me in with Lorianne, and it really made all of it seem so much more doable. And now we are certified as well.
Oh, that's great. Oh, yay. It is a daunting process but it's just paperwork. I mean, I don't want to say just paperwork because, Taya also was like an enormous help in getting it done. And she would say it's a little bit more than paperwork, Heather. But I am proud to, say that I'm certified.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, I joke that I think WeBank knows more about my business than I do.
I think great.
But no, I mean, I think that's just such a great example, though, of as a female leader yourself, just being so gracious and helping us was so meaningful. And would that happen in an old style production? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Especially like from where I sit, it's my business and it's just me, and it's very competitive. I've never been that way. I've always been open to sharing, and, my dearest, bestest friend is another rep, and we together hosted events with other reps in San Francisco. She and I co-market together, in different cities. And, I've always been interested in helping people and, sharing information. I'm a founding board member of the AMA, and it's all about education and sharing. And, and people who join the AMA have been like, wow, I've always been on my own. And it's really helpful to have these roundtables and sit in on these discussions and hear what other reps are doing. And I think, it's just really important to just be present for each other because it's too hard otherwise.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and I mean, thank you for being the leader you are in this industry.
Oh, very nice of you. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's so true. I mean, I'm very inspired by the way you've been able to build in support and community and all of that in what you do. I mean, even just this podcast, I don't know how you have the hours in the day to do any of it, but I do think it's meaningful.
It's been a highlight of my career, this capsule of podcasts. It's pretty amazing, the amount of people we've spoken to and the amount of people who have listened and learned. And, and so thank you for offering your time to be a part of it. It's very special. So thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. As I told you, it's my first podcast, and I love podcasts. I think I never went to business school. And when I first started Piecemeal, I started listening to business podcasts. And I joke that podcasts were my business school.
That's amazing. There's so many great ones out there. We'll have to trade on email later. We'll have to trade some good ones for each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
But before we leave, I ask everybody the same two questions. And sometimes I feel like I'm sounding a bit like a broken record and I want to change the questions. But now I feel like, oh, it's been so long, I can't change the questions. So the first one is, what is your favorite thing to do on a Sunday? And then the second one is, if you weren't a producer, what would you be?
Oh, well, the Sunday question is not exciting for us. Sunday is cleaning day in our house. So I don't know if it would be my favorite thing to do on a Sunday, but it is what I do on Sundays.
That feels really good to start the week with a very clean house and organized.
Yes. Although, sometimes we'll make pizza on Sunday and that's amazing. And what would I do otherwise? I don't know. I mean, I would probably be deeper in the animal rescue trenches. Animal welfare is super important to me. We have so many amazing pets of our own and are always trying to foster and get animals adopted. Or maybe I'd be like one of those professional eaters who like eats on camera so people don't feel lonely. I feel like I'd be good at that.
I love that. Okay. Excellent. That is one of the most unique answers I've ever heard. That and the bus driver. I always refer to that. So I like the professional eater so people don't have to be alone.
Right. What do they call it? Mukbang.
Yeah, that's awesome. Anyway, you were an amazing guest. I loved our conversation today. I really appreciated the back and forth and just the insights that you are bringing to our listeners. So thank you for your time. And I know our paths will cross and I look forward to that next time.
Yes, same. Thank you so much for having me, and to everybody listening, thanks for listening.
Have a good day.
You too.